This is the SquareUsUp template file that you can download from the website. As you can see, there's not much to it, but as you will soon see, this simple spreadsheet is actually a powerful expense sharing tool. First, we'll customize the template for our project. Let's say this is a road trip taken by 4 friends. We'll give the project a title, and now we're going to name the friends on the trip. That's it. Our project is now ready to use. Transactions can be typed directly into the sheet. So we'll do that. The first transaction was that Jeff bought groceries for the group. And the other 3 are sharing equally in the responsibility for paying it. So we simply have a purchase split 4 ways, and we can see that the balances indicate that Jeff is now owed the $140.67 that he covered for the other 3, who each owe $46.89. We could enter our next transaction into the sheet by clicking Grid Entry to open up a new row, but we can also use Form Entry to use a fill-in form. This next transaction is going to be lunch, which was purchased by Andy. And only 3 people had lunch, Andy and Jeff and Mitch. Mark did not have lunch, so they decided to split the cost 3 ways. And when we click OK, it's the exact same as if you typed the transaction directly into the sheet. And we can see that once again, ending balances have been updated. For the next transaction, Mark bought gas for his car. But because they were using Mark's car, the group agreed that Mark would not pay for gas for the whole trip. The other 3 would share the expense equally. So we're going to go to fractional shares and have each one of the other 3 pay 1/3 of the cost, which would of course leave Mark owing nothing, as shown in the charged column. And when we click OK, we can see the notation. The S's are now followed by 1/3. Any information after the S indicates that it's not a evenly split share. It indicates what portion of the expense that person is responsible for. That night, the guys got dinner. It was paid for by Mitch. And instead of splitting it equally, they decided to use the receipt to determine how much each of them owed. So these numbers are just taken right off of the receipt. And we can see that they're being charged what we said, and Mitch would be charged whatever's left over after the other 3 have paid their fair share. And the notation now shows dollar amounts after the S's. Next up, Jeff and Mark decided to buy souvenirs for themselves. This is an unshared payment. They did not share the expense of these souvenirs with anyone else. They just paid for them themselves. We can see that in the spreadsheet, there are no S's, there was no sharing, and as a result, balances didn't change. So this is entirely optional to record an unshared payment, but if you do, then the totals for the sheet will include the charges and payments for all expenses, not just shared ones. At this point, Andy wanted to relieve his debt, and he made a payment of $60 to Jeff. This is called an internal payment. It goes from one group member to another. And this uses a second code where the S's indicate a shared payment and R indicates the receipt of money from someone else in the group. In this case, Andy paid $60 to Jeff. This brought down Andy's debt by $60, and it meant that Jeff is now owed $60 less. At this point, Jeff received a groceries rebate from the program he was in at his grocery store. He got a rebate of $50. A rebate means he received money rather than paying it, so it would be a negative amount of money, and it, of course, will be shared equally with the other members of the group, just as the original groceries expense was. And when we click OK, it's just a normal transaction, except for the fact that Jeff received $50 instead of paying $50. It was now time for the guys to get hotel rooms for the night. They got 2 rooms. The first room was paid for by Mark, and Andy was his roommate. However, the room only had 1 bed. Mark had to use a rollout bed, so they decided that Andy was going to pay for 60% of the cost of the room, leaving Mark with the other 40%. And we can see in the charge column what they were each actually going to pay. And the notation is what we saw before, but this time after the S is a percentage. The second room was purchased by Mitch. This was also for hotel, and Jeff was his roommate, but they had 2 beds in the room and they split it equally. Finally, the day ended with Andy and Jeff wanting to relieve a lot of the debt that they had accumulated, and they decided to each pay Mitch money in order to level out their balances. You can have multiple payers to one recipient, as is shown in this last transaction. If this all made sense, you're pretty much a SquareUsUp expert already. We didn't look closely at the summary section, but as we entered transactions, everything was updated automatically. We can see what each person was charged over the course of the spreadsheet, what each person paid out of pocket over the course of the spreadsheet, and of course, what their current balance is. And it's important to understand these balances will always add up to exactly 0. Since this is a spreadsheet, it shouldn't be any surprise you can make changes directly into the cells of the spreadsheet. If you think this should have been $144, make the change, summary section instantly updated. Whether you're typing in a new transaction or changing an existing one, you might have a slip of the finger and type in something that doesn't make any sense. SquareUsUp is very friendly. It highlights the row with the error, and in this case it's highlighting the cell because that is not a valid value. Everything beneath it turns gray to tell you that only the transactions up until the error row are used in the summary calculations. In this case, we can just go ahead and say that should have been $154. But errors can be more subtle. Suppose we say it was $104. Well, 104 is a perfectly legitimate number and it's not highlighted in red, and yet this row is still flagged as having an error. A really nice thing you can do to existing transactions, highlight the row by clicking on the row number and click Form Entry, and it brings that transaction up into the form for you to edit. Well, everything looks good, so let's click OK, and now you see why SquareUsUp flagged an error. The dollar shares cannot total over the paid amount. Yet 104 isn't a big enough number for those shares. We'll change it back to 154, and everything is fixed. So you have 2 ways of editing cells, directly on the spreadsheet or using the Form Entry button. While SquareUsUp gives you plenty of information about all of the monetary transactions in the group, you can get a lot more. And to demonstrate this, I'm going to expand the area of our spreadsheet. We're going to use the toggle display button. When we do this, we can see that now, beside the transaction section, we have the balances section. This shows everybody's running balances after each transaction was made and gives you a nice little bar chart to depict who owes money and who's owed money. If you press toggle display again, you can see the charges. This is what each person was charged in each transaction. Click it again, you can see what each person paid or received in each transaction. And subsequent toggles will give you combinations of balances and charges, or balances and payments, or charges and payments, or all 3, balances, charges, and payments. And you can leave the display permanently in this state if that's what you like to see. The buttons at the top of each SquareUsUp spreadsheet not only provide powerful capabilities to the spreadsheet, but also assure that you're not going to have to know any Excel whatsoever. Insert rows will let you insert rows within your transactions, and delete rows will delete rows you no longer want. Move rows will move them around, copy them to other locations, and even sort your transaction rows. Edit titles simply lets you change the titles on your spreadsheet. Change users makes it very easy to add users, rearrange the users, rename users. Adjust balances lets the sheet start with people having balances other than 0. New sheet will let you create new spreadsheets within your Excel workbook, and to know why that might be advantageous, it's all contained in the documentation. Print reports has a number of reports. SquareUsUp report is a nice one that actually shows who owes what money and who is owed money, and gives you a suggestion for how to get everyone back to a balance of 0. And the transactions report is a very nice report that has 1 page for each user and shows in a very easily read form all the transactions each person was involved in, what they were charged, paid, and received in that transaction, and what their resulting balance was at the end of it, to let everyone know how they got to the ending balance that they had. The website fills in the details for everything shown here and more. I hope you can see that SquareUsUp is in another league from every other expense sharing spreadsheet out there. If you think it could be the expense sharing solution your group has been looking for, download it now and give it a try.